Joining tonight, we are going to continue a Board of Selectmen meeting for December 16th, 2019. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if we could all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I think I'm going to take something out of order here. We've got, the next on the agenda, we've got the public hearing for tax classifications, but I know there are some folks here that might want to speak to that, so I'm going to move public comment ahead of the public hearings. So if anybody has public comment they'd like to do, please come up to the podium. Yeah, do you want to do it now, Will, or do you want to wait for the hearing?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to start off by introducing myself to those who know me, for those who don't. I'm Will Carpenter. I'm Vice President for the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce. And it's been my pleasure for many years to present before this board on behalf of the roughly 300 businesses in North Andover that are in fact members of the Chamber. This board has always been very welcoming and receptive to me. I want to thank you for that. And this will be my last time presenting this board as I'm retiring as of February 1st. So,
Congratulations.
so thank you for all your past support and indulging me and putting up with me. So. But here we are once again on behalf of the business community. Again, you've always been very fair, I believe, to the business community, but we must ask that you continue to be fair. And in light of the fact that many businesses in the area employ so many local residents, and unemployment would not be a pretty picture for these people. And the tax on commercial really is one of the only things that can help businesses stay competitive, and it's one of the only things that can actually be keel even or perhaps lower to help out the business community. And in light of that fact, again, on behalf of the many members of the Chamber who are businesses in the town of North Andover, we would respectfully ask that at least you don't raise the rate and perhaps consider lowering it. And for that, I thank you very much.
Will, if you could just make sure you sign the sheet there, and
Yep.
possibly for your last time.
Yes, Chairman Valencourt. And thank you all again very much.
And congratulations and best wishes into your
Thank you.
retirement.
Appreciate it.
Well, you're up there, son. How do we, I'm not asking you to pick favorites, but how do we as an overall rate typically compare to the other communities?
Well, that's usually Rosemary's question.
I
was
was
going to
waiting,
say-
and I'm like, you're not jumping in to ask it. We have to.
No, I asked that, and we usually fare really pretty well with some other communities. So.
As I've said in the past few years, you fare very well, you are competitive, and you are fair, which is why I opened up my comments that way.
Yeah.
And we thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Will.
Congratulations, Will.
Okay, continuing public comment, we have someone else.
Hi, all. Ellen Mosier, 137, and Chair of the Trustees at Osgood Hill. Just want to say that we had a fabulous weekend at Holidays. The 3 days were phenomenal. The crowds were as expected, even though we had monsoons on Saturday. The local vendors put in so much time and effort with their catering, and people were continuing their family tradition. And it was a very welcoming, much-needed community event, and it was very much appreciated with all the support from the community. And we wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you.
Any other public comment? If you could just make sure you sign the sheet, too. Did
Hi,
you sign
my-
the sheet, Ellen?
My name's Melissa Rivers, 179 Andover Street. You might be surprised that I'm here to discuss the license. I know the licensing issue tonight on Stevens Coolidge Place is on your agenda. I understand that they currently have had a license in place during 2019 for events there, 365 days a year from like 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I see they're trying for a renewal on that. You all are aware of all the issues that we've had. I certainly don't need to rehash all of our concerns, but I just feel, again, like this, we really are opposed to such a broad license for them, given the increase in events, and we would hope that you would put some serious, significant limitations on any licenses that are issued to them. And so it's, I don't know if you want me to specify what I want those restrictions to be, but
We allow, we will have comment too underneath when there's actual that discussion, right? That the public could be weighing in under licensing?
It'll be a public hearing, so
I don't know if I should.
I can address that to the chair.
We can go into detailed comments during I was planning,
Okay.
I anticipated that you guys were gonna come, so I was planning on having some
Surprise.
discussion during that agenda item. If
Okay.
you wanna wait and dive into it, then that's fine.
Okay.
Just to,
Okay. Can I borrow your pen? Thank you.
thanks.
Any other public comment this evening? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the public hearing for tax classification. So I'll hear a motion to open that public hearing.
A motion to open the public hearing for tax classification. If you want, I can read that.
Yeah, if you could just read the verbiage.
Because it is. Move to open the public hearing in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 56, as amended, to determine the percentage of local tax levy which will be borne by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the FY20 tax rate. It's funny to say that.
Okay, we have, thank you. A motion, do we have a second?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we are in a public hearing, and we have included in the package, we have some information regarding the tax classifications this year.
Usually finance director and I run through it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Chair Melissa Rodriguez, Town Manager, Lynn Savage, Finance Director. How are you this evening?
How are you?
So you all have the package that was in your agenda, with the letter that was put together to outline some specifics on the tax rate setting. Just a couple broad, high-level overviews. North Andover's levy will be raised at $77,464,858, which represents 4.31% of last year's levy, which was $74,267. Levy ceiling is based on a valuation of $5,354,294,274, and we have an excess levy of a levy excess of $133,857. So we had new growth this year that was certified at $1,340,650. Moving on, just an overview of residential property tax options. If we were to choose no shift, of course, it would be a 1%, which would be equal. Residential and commercial would all be the same, and that would be at about $14.53. That's what the rate would be across the board. As you know, we always vote a shift, and we're recommending in this year for 2020, based on where the LA4 and the LA13 for the assessed values came back from the DOR, we're recommending a 1.29 shift. I'll explain a little bit why we're recommending that. Last year, we recommended, and we had a 1.36 shift, which kept the residential and the commercial at about an 83-17% split, which is, historically, that's what we do every year. We keep it at residential at 83% of the tax rate and the commercial at 17. If we were to go to the 1.36 this year, that would change the percentage to 82 versus 17.8, which is almost 18%. In order to keep with what we've been doing historically, we would have to go to a 1.29 shift, which is 83% for residential and 16.9 for commercial. And what that does is, if you were to look at an average single-family home, assuming that everything stayed the same, the valuation didn't change from FY19 to FY20, there would be an increase of approximately $274 over the year for their tax bill. Now, again, that's an average single-family home with no value change. So everything stays status quo. The only thing that changes is the actual tax rate. And the tax rate would be $13.89 for '20 versus 1341, which it is currently for FY19. And on the commercial side, at the 1.29, it would raise the average commercial property $857 for the year, versus if we were to go to the 1.36, like we are at presently, it would be $1,533 increase. So we're trying to be equitable between the residential and the commercial, and not make, the increases pretty much equal, and keeping the percentage the same as we do historically.
Lynn, just one quick question, I don't know if the others, but from the LA 13, I mean, the 1.3 million, that's like two times what we normally would call up. new growth.
Last year, we had about 1.2 million
We did?
in new growth. So this is due to a couple bigger projects that are coming on board. It's not an every year situation. I mean, we normally average from 600 to 700,000. So we've been budgeting conservatively at the 650 to 700,000, so that if we don't ever hit that and we budget if we were to budget to the 1.3 and we didn't come to that amount of new growth, we would have a shortfall in our budget.
Okay.
So it's better to budget conservatively and have the new growth than it would generate additional revenue to fall to be calculated into the free cash for the next year's budget cycle. Yep.
If I could just add, one of the reasons why we're suggesting the 1.29 rather than the 1.36 is because the commercial value growth was much higher than the residential value growth. So the commercial properties increased by 4.63% on average, while the residential properties only increased by 1.38% on average. So if both the classes had increased at the same level, right, we could stay at the 1.36 and still see that equity. But because the commercial properties increased at a much higher rate, we are suggesting the lower shift in order to keep that equity in place.
What was the basis what was the basis for the commercial to rise and the residential still being up?
Sure.
But again, just for everybody,
Yeah.
I just want to make this one point. For everybody at home, this is not what's happening right now. This is what
No.
happened a year ago,
Correct.
correct?
Right.
So don't be, gee, my property, I know it went up more than that. But I'm still trying to figure out why the commercial went up.
Okay, so as you know, last year was a reval year. This is the residual for the additional
forgot.
reval, which is the commercial pieces are coming on now.
I see.
It was at the far end of the reval, so now it's hitting through in this fiscal year's tax
Okay,
rate setting.
That
Yep.
seems to make sense.
Yep.
Last year, we had sort of the opposite situation.
Yes.
Where the residential went up so high.
Right.
Because all of those had already were revaled
Right.
for that discussion. And this year,
Yep,
It's
it's
kind
the
of the
commercial.
opposite.
Yep, because it was done at the later
Later.
part of the year, so it fell into this year. It's a timing thing. And next year, hopefully, it will level out. It will be a more level playing field.
and I'm assuming any change, I mean, the change isn't really, you said commercial had a huge growth, but it's not, and it was a few projects. It's not the Amazon
No.
project,
No.
because that's not done
not
yet.
permitted
So
yet.
we can anticipate in future years,
Correct.
it's going to grow even more substantially on the commercial side because of that. So
Yep.
this is
Right.
other,
But that's a good
a
thing. 'cause it
couple of
takes the
other good
burden off.
projects.
Yes.
Yes, I'm just
Residential, yeah.
raising it for,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever we do, it's, that's coming,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yes.
We did create a chart for you, which I put on your desks, and it basically takes the average single-family, the average condo, the average two-family, and the average commercial property. It shows you their 2019 assessment, their 2019 bill, their new 2020 assessment for the average, and then what would happen if we do the 129%, the 136, the 138, and the 139, and what the bills look like. And again, it's in a vacuum, right, because we're trying to find properties that maintain that value, and that still stay as the average property, and that can sometimes change, but it's just to give you an analysis.
That's kind of what's throwing me off, because our discussion always was median home value as opposed to average, because obviously,
Yeah.
you can throw in a $2 million home into a pool with a bunch of $400,000 homes, and that dramatically increases what the average represents, or vice versa, right? I mean,
Right.
it could- So what does our median home value look like, right?
So just off of that, I prefer to use the average because a lot of the time you'll have some properties that will really skew your median. I think more than the average personally, because you may have land that has no buildings on it, that's in a residential zoning, and they will still put that in the residential base. So for me, I always don't really like doing the median, I prefer to do the average. But she can, I think, do you have the quartiles?
what's the difference?
If we could compare. I don't know if I brought them.
I don't know.
So like, and it was just quick
I don't know.
pulling up, but like, for instance, the average residential value right now is about $100,000 more than what the median value was in last year's discussion. And so that's, without being able to dive more into the numbers, that's what's throwing me off is, so how does that, when we're using average as the baseline, how does that actually, what does that actually translate for our residences?
So I have the quartile for the 136. I don't have it for the 129, because we were working on based on the average, so I didn't. So the median is 553,731 for single-family residential.
553.
Yep.
Is the median.
Yep,
So it's really close to the
very,
average,
very
yeah.
close to the
yep,
average.
it's very close to
Just
the
giving
average.
us a benchmark, though. I mean,
Yeah.
It's
Right.
just like, this is what, it's just so folks can have a general idea of what the tax rate would be, or tax rate would be. It's a benchmark. I mean, you have to go
Yeah,
and
but
look at
like-
your own assessed value to get the real
So the
numbers.
discussion last year, which was pretty robust, was that we had a healthy number of residents that were left confused about why did they have a tax increase when they were told that they weren't going to have an increase or that there was going to be a cut. And so it's just, for me, apples to apples, where that's what I'm trying to understand, only because
Right.
for the past several years, that's the benchmark we used, and so I didn't know
So
if
it's
by
close,
changing.
but,
Yeah, so that's,
Couple
I
of dollars
appreciate
off.
you answering that.
yeah.
I think it's also really important for people to remember that tax bills don't typically ever go down, right? So just because a rate is decreasing is typically because your value has increased, and if the rate is increasing, it's typically because your value has decreased. And so you really have to think about your tax bill like a scale, right? And you're always gonna be kind of in that middle balance. Your rate will go down because your value went up, or your value will go down because your rate went up, but you don't typically see your bill decreasing, unless debt falls off or a debt exclusion or something else, but we're not seeing that this year.
Well, so there was two pieces to that. So last year, part of it was the narrative that was set. When you talk about tax bills going down, everybody expected their tax bills to go
Course,
down, and so of course we had a substantial chunk of the community not
Mm-hmm.
experience that at all. But then the other piece of that, though, is I think that setting expectations, but also having our residents understand that this reflects a budget that was approved 6 months ago, and that this isn't us setting a rate. Like, we don't get to decide, do we want it to be a $14.80 rate? Do we want it to be a $20 rate? Do we want it to be a $4 rate? We don't get to decide that. It's simply the shift.
Right, so.
Business, what part of our budget that they already
Yes.
approved is gonna be shouldered by businesses, and what part of our budget that they already approved is gonna be shouldered by
Right.
residences, and both are increasing, so.
Right, I mean, it's a great
It's
point.
about
So
right.
the Board of Selectmen is not responsible for the budget, town meeting's responsible for the budget, they technically set the levy, right? So the residents of the town set the levy, and the Board of Selectmen is not responsible for making the tax rate either. The determination that the Board of Selectmen makes is how much of that levy is borne by the commercial base versus the residential base. That's your job.
This is it's a balancing act, like you said, but in the context of, we're picking residential and commercial, how does this, so that we're able to better communicate it to these subsets of residences? So we've always had this discussion about how condominium owners seem like they're getting this type of increase or this type of decrease. Like, so peeling back that average residential tax rate, so we're seeing how the impact will be on the average residential tax bill, but when you peel it back, what's that look like for multifamily owners, and what's it look like for condominium owners?
So I think you can kind of see that from the chart we made, because we do it for single family, two family, and condo.
Oh, on the, not online, so it's the.
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry,
right
the
here,
paper one, so that's.
yeah, it's a hard copy that, yeah, I just handed it to you because I just did it this afternoon. So you can see that for condos, right, the 2019 bill was $3,335. They are seeing assessment change of about 16,000, but if you go with the 1.29, their bill would be going up to $3,680. The condos are actually the least affected by the shift, because even if you picked the 1.39, their bill is $3,621. It's really only a $60 swing. So they're actually the least affected of anyone, based on this analysis.
But like on this analysis with the 129 shift, 1.29 shift, Phil, like a
Yeah.
two-family,
Yep.
theirs is gonna go up 167 on average. And the single family, the average is 344, and the condo on average is 345. So the difference between condo and single family is not,
I mean, the discussion this year is different than last year where, I mean, last year it was about, our commercial was already seeing a decrease no matter what. Everybody's seeing an increase regardless of the classification, and,
Yeah.
and our commercial is already seeing it. I mean, it's why the discussion changes year from year. I mean, last year it really was, had we stuck with the
Yeah.
split, commercial was still gonna see a cut. That's not the case
Right.
this year.
Right.
So the context of this discussion is different than it
Different,
would have been
yeah.
last year.
Right, because
Um,
as I said, last year, the residential all got hit by the reval, and this year it's shifting in, and the commercial it got hit by
And the result
reval.
is both are going up.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so to give, if we were to give residents even more relief, it's at the expense of an already
Yes.
strapped business community, which is a
Yes.
different conversation
Exactly.
than last year. I think that that's
Yep.
important.
Sure.
That
And so keeping it at, putting it to the 1.29 will be equitable, because it's going to keep it at that same percentage that we've always
We've been doing that
historically been
for a
doing.
long time now.
Yes.
It was a big discrepancy, I mean, Lynn, you and I know, we've been doing this a while, and we tried to correct that the residents were really bearing way too much of the burden
Mhm.
of taxes going up. So then we said, okay, let's try to reset it, and from that point forward, we've tried to keep it
At the
about the
83.
same, unless, of course, sometimes there is something major going on in the commercial industry or the residential industry that we are not aware of. Condos last year,
Took a big
they
hit.
really got hit hard, but it's because prior to that, their property values weren't doing so well.
I know.
And then they were, and they kind of got, but it's the good news, bad news. The good news is your property value is going up. The bad news is, so are your taxes.
Typically, they go hand in hand,
Yes.
They
unfortunately.
go hand in hand.
We did
But-
try to create a very
Experienced that last
user-friendly
year.
document this
Yeah.
time with definitions so that people could educate themselves on how we set the taxes and kind of what the steps are, because I think that is confusing. And we're also just about to roll out ClearGov.
Yep.
And so with ClearGov, what you'll be able to do is kind of learn more about your tax bill and how your tax bill is used, which I think people will like.
This goes towards.
Yes,
This
and I-
goes for this, for that.
yeah.
I really like that.
I think people will really enjoy that.
And all of this is regulated by the
Yes.
state. So it's not just pulling things out of thin air. It's closely regulated to make sure that there's no shenanigans going on. So
Mhm.
it's tough stuff, though.
Yes.
It is. Nobody likes, I know I don't like it. But it is what it is. And it's probably the most confusing topic
Yes.
that we have, especially when you
It does
describe
train your-
how
your
property,
brain a little bit.
single-family residential property is evaluated and how commercial is
Mm-hmm.
evaluated, which is a whole other conversation that is just really confusing. And then you throw in the 2.5 and everything else, and everyone just,
New growth,
their eyes glaze over.
debt exclusion, there's all kinds of.
It is very complicated.
And it still puts us at $6 to $8 lower per thousand on a commercial tax base than our neighbors. So depending on the neighbor.
Right, Andover's voting tonight as well.
And they were at like a 157 shift. right?
They have a very high shift, and we were just talking about it earlier, because I was
Very high tax rate.
Yeah.
Very high,
But
doing
the
something
shift,
else.
shift aside, their rate per thousand is, $27, over
Yeah.
$27 per thousand for commercial, whereas we're looking at still under $20.
Correct.
And Methuen was 26-ish.
And I will tell people, as somebody who follows this in the industry too, believe it or not, we'll just use a $500,000 home, and you compare what our town pays in taxes for a 500, and I'm saying sale price, not assessed value, that's a whole other thing. We usually are significantly lower than the area communities. But again, I like to compare to what the public decides, the actual sale price. And when you compare a $500,000 sale in North Andover versus Andover, Methuen, Lawrence, and beyond, we usually fare pretty well in comparison that we're lower. So not great relief when you're paying the bill, but it shows that we're trying, I think.
On the point that I think you made, Phil, about the tax rate for other communities for commercial, I mean, so you're saying, I mean, we could suffice with a greater shift than 1.29 because there's a lot of buffer there, because we still have a really good situation for our businesses. I mean, is that what you're trying to say?
No, I was just more using the opportunity to stand up to kind of anybody who's so inclined to watch, or if there's a report to be pulled from it, it's that this discussion, no matter what, there's been several factors that have been presented that our business community, I mean, it's the reality that both are facing under any scenario. They will have an increased tax bill, but the rate-wise, like if you're a business looking to relocate to North Andover, and you're looking at property values, not only are property values for commercial slightly less than our neighbors, but the tax rate overall is substantially less for, a $500,000 commercial property here and a $500,000 commercial property in Andover is taxed at
Well, yeah,
$8 to $9 less per thousand.
right.
So that's, I was actually saying, I'm kind of making a sales pitch. I mean, that's, it's great. I mean, yeah. But I mean, for our friend Will, I don't know if Will's still here, but, I mean, it still keeps us, in that spot where, when it comes to economic and community development, to be able to market our community and still show a tax rate, a commercial tax rate that is so much lower than our neighbors, and you can come here and have access to many of the same benefits. It just helps put that in context.
Selectman Keen asked me to do an analysis earlier today, and I compared two office buildings, one in Andover and one in North Andover, and I used the rate that had been suggested for Andover for tonight, so that's actually $27.14. So the one in Andover is 0.2 acres of land and 4,200 square foot building. The one in North Andover is 0.115 acres of land and 5,007 square feet. The Andover building is priced at assessed at $780,000. The one in North Andover, same size, $508,000. The Andover bill would be $21,182, and our bill under the 1.29 would be $9,538. So half the cost of doing business.
Less than half, I mean, really.
It's $1,000 a month in
Yeah.
revenue
Yeah.
back
And
to the
right,
business
I also
owner.
did it for the bank.
For the
Yeah.
1.36 shift, though, it's still only
Still.
$10,000. I mean, it's still less than half of Andover's at a 1.36 shift.
So interesting. Yeah.
So we're a good place to do business regardless of the shift decision. It's the moral of that story.
So, what's our thoughts here? Do we want a further discussion? Do we want to make a motion? What are we thinking for our tax rate? Or our split, I should say, not our rate, the split. Last year, we were at 1.36.
But it helps us consistent with the 83.
Yes.
83.17,
Yeah.
yep.
And the 1.29 this year.
Yes.
Keep us consistent with that.
Basically, we're saying 83% of the tax burden goes to residential, 17% goes to commercial, which is what we've held to for the last, I don't know, as long as I've been on the board, is where we've made that shift.
And it was around that time, probably,
Yeah.
that we started making the changes, maybe a little before.
So just for the sake of discussion, but just using tenure, how much commercial business is there in town today as opposed to 15 years ago? So if you're talking about the split being 83-17, and where did that come from? Well, that's where we've been historically. Are we historically at the same place in terms of the split of the amount of property in the town? I mean, what's more important, keeping to 83-17 because it's always been like that, or reflecting reality? Has there been a shift of more commercial or more residential? I'm just opening up that discussion to say, just because it was that way 15 years ago, is 83-17 today as valid as 83-17 was 15 years ago? I don't know.
Well, the shift,
That's a good question.
the shift tax rate is relatively recent. I mean, 15 years ago, did we have a split tax rate? I know that you're using that for an example.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, I actually think that it's
It's been around a long time.
And 15 years ago, we still had Lucent in the picture, right? So the commercial base was probably larger then with that major tax player there.
I don't know the answer to the question.
But
I'm
that
just-
is, that, I think that
positing.
actually, that's a really
I
good
think
question
it's a
from
very
Selectman
good
Nobley.
question as well, yeah.
Like, if our philosophy is based on, the pie being a certain size, and if that pie itself, and we've always, artificially placed more of the burden on the commercial side, than they actually make up overall. But if that pie has actually changed over the past decade. When that fiscal policy was first kind of adopted, it would be interesting to know, is the slice of the pie for commercial still the same as it was when we developed that policy? That
I
prob-
wouldn't know the answer to that, but yeah.
It's,
I'd kind of like to know that, actually.
it's
I
kind of
would
a
be
complicated
transparent.
question, though, too, because of the fact that the trends now, so many people are working out of their home, and the office space doesn't seem to be as in high of demand, and, I mean, there's so many different factors.
I don't know, I think it's actually pretty simple. Either the property's commercial or it's residential. And can't we look at our records and say, today, right, we have an assessor can tell us, this is how much is commercial, this is how much is residential. Let's just look and see what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Just to have that, I'd just like to have that before. I just feel a little more comfortable in sticking with what has historically been, just have it backed up by what it is. I don't know, just my general feeling, I don't know. Anybody else feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, it would be
Yes, I think it's
interesting,
a good
an
question.
interesting data piece to know. I don't think that, it's just, our philosophy was based on the pie being cut a certain way,
Mhm.
and if that pie's been adjusted. That being said, I'm sure it's only been marginal. I mean, we
Okay.
haven't, in the future, I can imagine in the next 3 to 5 years, the pie's gonna change. It better change, because that would
Yeah.
mean some things are really wrong.
But
But it's
that'll.
changing on both ends, right? You're getting both residential growth and commercial growth at the same time. I don't know that the percentage of the classes change the equity argument, right? Because you're really talking about the growth of the bill as well. I will say, I also find an interesting data point, but we can't really put off voting tonight because we already had to cancel our
Okay.
hearing because of the snow, and now we have to get our bills out. And Lynn will probably have a heart attack, which we don't want. We want to keep her healthy, happy.
Because our next meeting
Right.
isn't
We don't want
until
to
the
quit
15th.
Right.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think it's
a
interesting
good
data point,
question, but
yeah.
We need to either resolve it tonight,
Right.
now, or we need to move on forward without it.
So that said, I do think it's really important, if this is, there's sort of a feeling of this is kind of good to know, it's gonna be important going ahead in the next 3, 5, 10 years, because we have things that are gonna be affecting that scale, a lot of things.
I mean, we can get that data together for you.
Yeah.
For the future.
Yeah,
But for
okay.
tonight, it would be impossible for us to get that data to you right now.
I understand the
Yeah.
restrictions of where we're at, but.
I mean, we also understand that this is just weeks into your first classification hearing with us, and that we're developing that format, and so.
Not the first time I've done one, so don't worry.
No, thank God. It's helped with your explanation.
I guess, sorry, I would have been, generally, I think let's stick with what was the status quo was my going in position, and if we try to stick with 83-17 for some reason, because we thought that made sense, and I still have the question, why do we think that makes sense? Why is that the split?
That's a good question. I had the same question.
But, so I would have been fine to just say, okay, let's go with that split, because that's what we've always done. But I still, I guess, have on the side of my head, I want to stay attractive to business owners. But even, I mean, that's why I asked Melissa to do this analysis, because even with your average building that's exactly the same, Andover and North Andover, I mean, we're still, even at one point, even if we kept it the same at 1.36, it's still like half the tax bill you would have if you were elsewhere. So we're still extremely attractive. I mean, I guess it's a burden for them to swallow an increase. I get that, and I will weigh that, and maybe that's why I wouldn't go for 1.36. But it's not like we're saying, let's put a shift onto commercial that's gonna put them completely out of whack with our neighbors. I mean, we're still really competitive.
Again, it's a lot more complicated than that. A lot of it is location. If these are, Andover businesses are located right off of 93,
No, that's true.
that's why I was saying it's not as simple, as someone who studies this kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes into it, and it can change from year to year. I'll give you that. Maybe it's something we should just keep an eye on year to year, maybe but a lot of it is just the location. It's a quicker drive into Boston, I mean, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah,
Main Street Andover is Route 28.
yeah.
Main Street North Andover is not a route. So it's very, very complicated. And then, of
Baked
course,
into the value.
so, and the other thing too is, if we do lose businesses, it hurts everybody. The other businesses, everyone sort of feeds off one another. I think we all know that. It's a very complicated, that's why we kind of got to a point where we felt as though both sides, residential and commercial, would be treated fairly, whereas I would argue in the past, they were not. Again, you assess commercial in many different ways, so they don't have, it's not as straightforward as residential. Residential is very straightforward. They assess commercial totally different. It's based upon the equipment in manufacturing.
Right.
Because, and I can understand why they would, the government has said, well, if they are paying too much money and taxes on their equipment, they're not going to survive. So it's very complicated. But I think when we sort of leveled that off, when there was clearly an advantage to the commercial industrial, that we sort of, and maybe even Lori would remember this, being on the school committee, this was a big bone of contention. When we sort of leveled it off, then we said, okay, going forward, we'll try to have everybody raise approximately the same percentage, which again is very difficult. But there's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, and I think the 83-17 rule is kind of like, it's a benchmark, right? It keeps, it's a drift point, keeps us from drifting too far.
Yeah.
In either, because like Rosemary said, at one point we had to kind of reel that back because it was shifting so far. And, if you look at it from year to year and you shift it a little more and a little more and a little more, eventually that shift becomes quite a bit more than, what we're, so it's really a benchmark. It's not like we have to stick to the 83-17. It's something we target in our sites to try to keep that, keep a true point of direction, I guess. But nothing says it's hard and fast that it has to be that, but it's just really keeps us from drifting too far in either direction.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if we're voting now. Do you want a motion? I'll make a motion,
Let me
or
just
are
see.
we gonna do that in
Well,
consent?
actually, we'll vote later, but we need a
So this is
motion.
the public hearing portion, so we
Oh.
move on to the public or,
Yeah.
we'd let.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, right, so we've deliberated. Anybody in the gallery here want to speak to this? This would have been Will's time to do that, but he was retiring, so he wanted to get out of here. Yeah, so, all right, so I'll have a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing to determine the percentage of local tax levy which will be bore upon by each class of real and personal property relative to setting the FY 2020 tax rate.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So we have a unanimous, the hearing is closed. So I am going to take out of order, out of consent items, I'm going to take a vote to set the property tax classification for FY '20, unless there's any objection to that. So I'm going to take consent item B out of order and move it ahead of the governmental reports.
I will move that the Board of Selectmen adopt a residential factor of 1.29 for the, sorry.
It's, there's that magic.
Oh, it's the
Well, yeah,
.9 blah,
magic
blah, blah.
rate that we
Sorry.
have that we can't calculate.
I forgot.
Yeah, no, I did that last year.
Move that the Board of Selectmen adopt a residential factor of .9561. 0.9561, which is representative of a 1.29 shift, for the purpose of classifying the FY 2020 North Andover property tax rates.
Can I ask for clarification?
Well, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
You did say .95607.
I said .9561 because that's all
That's all
the
that would
decimal
pick up.
places in this sheet.
Okay.
So in
is
the other
it true-
document you gave,
We went out more decimals.
Okay, so we don't want to just amend it
Right.
to .07 to,
.9561707.
You can do just to one, because that's all that's gonna show up at the DOR.
okay,
Okay.
so you're rounding up
On
to
the
your
LA,
just
the
okay, I
LA
just want to make
5
sure that
option is only gonna round to that number.
I know that we had to have an extra meeting last year to, because it wasn't.
Right, I remember that too.
Yeah.
Nope, this is-
So that's, I realize that this is all very seemingly casual, but not at all casual, so,
Nope, this was cut and paste directly from the
okay.
okay.
DOR.
So
Alright.
we're all good with the rate that has been motioned and seconded.
Yep.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that's unanimous. All right, so thank you all for getting through that again. Here.
Yeah, me too.
It wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad, it's just, nobody likes to make anyone
No.
pay more.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have governmental reports. So we have a couple of items on there. The first will be the town manager's recommended capital improvement plan for FY '21 through '25.
Thank you very much.
What did I do? Oh, no, I have, okay, no, I have that, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to be presenting first the capital improvement plan for fiscal year '21 through '25. And I like to start, even though I know you all know, with some of the basics, because people at home may not really have an understanding of what we're doing, and I think it's important for us to kind of constantly remember that. So our capital improvement plan identifies our capital items. Typically, they're tangible assets, projects that cost more than $25,000 and have a minimal useful lifespan of 5 years. It provides us a planning schedule, and it typically defines our financing options. As a policy, we have tried to fund projects of less than $50,000 within our operating budget, so you're only going to be seeing projects of $50,000 or more today. And then we form a capital budget for the current or future fiscal year, and that's typically our spending plan that will be voted on at town meeting. So it's a 5-year planning tool, allows us to plan for future needs. The way that we build this is that our department heads and the schools submit and prioritize their requests. The town manager and the finance director evaluate those requests, and this year was the first year that we had a group meeting where we discussed the requests and the concerns and the funding mechanisms. And for me, that's important because a lot of the time we make these requests in silos. People don't know what the other person is doing, and that allows us really to have kind of group discussions. Oh, you're planning on doing that this year. I was thinking about doing that too. I had prioritized that later, but we should really do it together because we'd get better prices. And I find that that usually works well. So our total plan has 35 projects in 9 categories over 5 years, with 2 additional categories that not included in that 35 projects for the Facilities Master Plan 1 and the Facilities Master Plan 2. The total over the 5 years is about $36 million, and I just ask you to remember that is estimated. About $26 million of that is funding that we're asking for from the town. The total for fiscal year '21 is $6,516,069 with 19 projects. And I just like to remind people that the capital improvement program is really a fluid document. It changes, right? We try to figure out what we'll need and what year it will be in, but things need to get prioritized. Sometimes we'll have something fail, which we didn't expect to fail, or we'll have a need that comes up because of a mandate from the state that we have to move around. And so, while this is a great planning tool, sometimes you put things out and people rely on them really quite literally, and I'm just reminding you that, you know, year 2, year 3, year 4 can look very different. Especially in this year, because the Facilities Master Plan 2 is in its infancy. We just opened the bids, they're currently being evaluated, and any numbers that you're seeing for Facilities Master Plan 2 are placeholders. And those numbers will change as we move forward with our finalization of that plan. So this is this year's request, and you can see the 19 projects with the $6.5 million total. These are mostly smaller projects this year, again, probably because the Facilities Master Plan 2 is not finalized. There's only 2 projects that are over $1 million. One of those is road work, which is offset by Chapter 90, and the other one is actually a part of the Facilities Master Plan 1, and that's a placeholder for additional funding for the senior center project. And you'll remember that that's actually out to bid right now. And we anticipate that we may need additional funds for that. The original appropriation that was made last town meeting was based on numbers and estimates from the 2011 Facilities Master Plan. So there really wasn't any accounting for inflation. And right now, we're seeing the cost of instruction at a high because of tariffs and because of steel. So projects are coming in higher than even we typically would see. So the combination of those 2 things leads the cost estimates for that project to be higher than we had anticipated. And so we put a placeholder in, And we anticipate that we'll have bids back before town meeting and hopefully before the warrant closes, so that we'll be able to update that number, but we want to have something in there right now. So that $2.5 million number you're seeing is for additional construction funding for the senior center. And again, that may be high, but we want to make sure we have something in there.
For that number, under roadway improvements, that is in addition to the Columbia Gas
Yes,
item
Yes.
that we had voted for last year, and that's all
Yep.
cleared and ready to go. So
yes. That's money, that project has already been bid.
that's the whole thing.
Right, this is our typical routine pavement management program. The next chart you're seeing, and it's in your books as well, is really the 5-year plan. So you can see that we try to go out for fiscal year 22, 23, 24, and 25, and really place projects in. Some of them are routine maintenance that we'll see every year, and if we went all the way out to fiscal year 45, we'd still see culvert replacements, right? Those are something that we have to do every single year. Other things like district-wide paving, school IT, those are things you're gonna see every single year. Other things, like the replacement of, the completion of the jail cell area, or a replacement fire truck, are really things that you don't see every year. They're one-time costs that you might see every 5, 10, 15, 20 years. One thing we did a little bit differently this year is that I like to have all of your capital projects, despite the funding source, in one bucket. So we have a couple of projects that we're actually requesting CPC funding for. However, they're still on this list because we may not get that CPC funding, but they're still priorities of the town. And so at some point, we may have to reprioritize our funding plan in order to account for those. So one example of those is the historic entrance stairs at the library. Another example of that is playgrounds. And this year's funding plan, I think, is a little bit different than what you're used to. We are planning to use mostly free cash. We're advising against using any debt this year. We have cash on hand, and since the Facilities Master Plan 2 is going to be requiring debt in future years, we think that it's most prudent to use the cash that we have on hand. That will avoid adverse impacts on the taxpayers and allow us to keep the percentage of debt that has been our goal for several years more in line with what we want to see. So again, we're looking at $5,196,069 from free cash, $820,000 from Chapter 90, and $500,000 in CPC applications that we'll be submitting.
Can you address for us the trade-off consideration given interest rates now, borrowing today versus
Yeah.
where 2-3 years down the line when we now have to go to the well, as it were?
Yeah.
So help us understand a little bit of
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the interest rates right now we're getting are anywhere from 3 to 3.5, depending on the amount that we're actually borrowing. The more we borrow, the better we get, to be
Right.
honest with you. And over the couple of years that we've been going, a lot of them, we've been declining
Right.
in the amount that we've been borrowing. So I think, you know, we break about even because we're getting about 2% interest, maybe a loss actually. So we're not gaining as much, we'd be paying more interest to borrow than we would be gaining for the money in the bank.
So when you model that against like a 1%, interest rate increase, which, not out of the question, what is,
What would the impact?
yeah, where would we?
Yeah, I would have to do the calculating on it. I don't know that off the top of my head, but as I said, we would be paying more interest to borrow right now than we'd gaining with the money in the bank.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'd lose probably 0.5 to 1% of
Okay.
interest.
Well, I think that's helpful to know because,
Yeah,
looking at anybody with a household budget is kind of looking at the same
Yep.
thing, so, thank you.
And then we do have 3 other capital improvements. Yeah, of course.
And Chris asked the question before, I was just getting ready to ask the same question. But, so have we thought about when interest rates go up? You had said we'd be losing money, but when interest rates go up for borrowing, maybe that the free cash money would come more in handy. I'm still a little bit confused as to why we would do this now with the lower interest rate in anticipation of what could be drastic changes with interest rate in the future.
But we do plan for that as well. As you realize, over the years, we've been building up the capital stabilization fund.
We have, and
So,
thank goodness, yeah.
With what we'd be recommending, I mean, each year we go to a basic percentage of the prior year's revenue. So we are building that up to really leave that money set aside for the goal of the future larger projects, like the facility master plan, or, you know, whatever comes out of that facility master plan. It could be, you know, a new school, a new fire station, who knows? I don't know what that plan is gonna bring us once it's finalized. But we're looking at the future by putting money aside in a stabilization fund.
Right.
And that gains its own interest, and it's upwards of, will hopefully be upwards of over $1 million to $2 million in the future, if we keep contributing the way we are and don't pull it back. Because otherwise, some of these projects this year, we would have funded with capital stabilization, so it's one bucket or the other. I mean, I think it's a prudent decision to use the free cash. We do have a very large free cash number this year that was certified.
Okay.
And it's an accumulative, it's not,
But I think you gather our point in our questioning.
yeah, I do,
This
I
could
gather.
turn on a dime.
It could, you're right, absolutely.
We could have, I don't even want to say it, but we could have something
Well,
that
it-
really upsets the economy. I'm not even going to say it. We all know the things that we're all thinking
Yep.
what could happen. But it is okay.
I think we're doing the planning though, because we are also building all of our other reserves. And they're very healthy.
And they are very healthy. Thank
Yes.
goodness. It's been a long
Yep.
haul, but yeah.
You-
Okay, but we don't,
I mean,
we could still
we
think
use
about this a little bit.
$5.1 million of free cash, we still are gonna have 10 million there. So it's not that we're using every penny.
When you
of
say it like that, it does
Yeah.
make it a little bit more.
Kind of
That's-
really-
That's a helpful number.
Okay.
Piece
Yeah.
of missing information.
There's
Yeah.
strategies around how much free cash you want to maintain. as well.
Exactly.
Oh, okay
Right.
now.
Exactly. Our free
All
cash
right,
number
all right.
is very high for the size of our community. And it's,
Okay.
I just want to point out that it's not free cash that we're generating every year,
No,
right? It's free
smile.
cash
It's
that we continue to
accumulative.
roll over.
Right, it's accumulative
I-
year
Okay.
after year.
All right,
Yeah.
that's a
Right.
big piece of
Yeah.
information that sheds a whole
I'm
new
not
light
using
on
it,
it.
we're not
Okay.
using it all.
You know, we don't, yeah, as Lynn, as you know, we're coming from a time where every
was
penny
negative.
counted. We had
Yes.
negative free cash.
Yep.
It doesn't seem like that long ago, but, okay,
No.
very
We would
good.
never do
Good
that,
answer.
no.
And then we do have 3 other capital improvement plans that are separate because they're done through an enterprise fund. So this is our water capital improvement plan, water enterprise fund. We have $2 million in projects for fiscal year '21, total projects of $4.3 million. And we're planning to use retained earnings. So every enterprise fund has retained earnings. It's basically the free cash of an enterprise fund. It's basically revenue that came in over the expenditures that's built up over the years. And that money really, as a best practice, is to be used for capital. And so we currently have certified retained earnings of $4,804,000. So we think this is a prudent plan for the water enterprise fund. For the sewer enterprise fund, we are requesting to use $500,000 in fiscal year '21, and again, plan to use retained earnings. The retained earnings in that account are $4,945,542. And then finally, we have,
Sorry, can we
yeah,
go back to the sewer?
of course.
The sewer on Route 125, can you just remind?
that-
So
yeah,
we
so
have
that's-
the grants and the different, but.
Yeah, you appropriated that already, so you
Okay,
would have
so
seen
that's-
that, would have been
Right,
fiscal year
so
'20.
that's not in there, okay.
Yeah, so
right.
you wouldn't see that on
Thank
this plan. And then for the Stevens Estate, we have 3 projects that we're proposing for this year. The current plan is to fund $50,000 with retained earnings if possible, and we will have to keep an eye on that. If that's not possible, then that project would have to move out to a further year. And then we plan to submit CPC applications for the second 2 projects, which are the restoration projects.
So in theory,
Mm.
should all of that work out, none of that money is coming from?
For the last 3, none of those monies are coming from the levy. They'll all be from either retained earnings or a CPC application. And that's it for the capital.
Just one question, going over the list of projects. So
Sure.
just out of curiosity, and of course you are the town manager, and were these in sync with what our department heads had requested for the most part?
Yes, so we had,
Okay.
we department head meeting. Everybody was very reasonable. I wasn't sure if we were gonna see like a lot of projects come in, but no, people were very reasonable. Everyone really worked collaboratively. We had a lot of discussion about the different projects. And these were really their top priorities.
So they.
Yeah,
so
we
they-
actually, we moved one thing up, after having, in the joint meeting, because facilities and the police had kind of a joint conversation, with the big group about the AC system for the dispatch area. I mean, that became apparent, that wasn't something that really could wait till 22, so that was we were able to move that up, right, kind of in this collaboration.
And other people in the room
Yeah.
kind of backed
Right.
off on what their top priority was, to
Right.
have it all work as a
Yeah,
puzzle.
it was really interesting, it worked really well, so.
Okay, that's good to know.
And I'll be presenting these with Lynn to the Finance Committee, as well after the holiday.
Great.
Oh, back to me? Okay, so, next on the agenda. Oh. Oh,
To accept it.
Move this Board of Selectmen accept the FY 2021 to 2025 capital improvement plan, reserving the right to make changes as additional information becomes available, and to forward the document to the Finance Committee for their review.
Second.
any discussion? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much for that. Good job. Okay, so next on the agenda, we're gonna move to the town manager's 5-year financial forecast.
Thank you, and I'd just be remiss if I didn't thank Lynn, who's been a saint the last month, helping me get all of these ready. We're very lucky to have her. So this is our town North Andover financial forecast, fiscal years 21 through 25. And I'd like to start this kind of just a short beginning about our financial condition. And so we continue to maintain our AAA bond rating, and that rating reflects our strong economy, our strong financial management, and our strong budgetary performances. In 2018, we again received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, and we received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award. They have not yet given the 2019 awards, and I'm sure we'll get those as well. And a little bit of information about our reserves. So this is the balance for our stabilization fund, our capital stabilization fund, our special education stabilization fund, that free cash, and our OPEB trust. And a little bit about why we forecast and what a forecast is. It's a tool, a management tool and a policy-making tool for us. It allows us to evaluate what our future years are gonna look like and make policy decisions based on that. And a lot of the time, it can serve as really an early warning system for the town. We can see future gaps and start talking about how we increase revenues or make cuts in order to alleviate those gaps. But it doesn't alleviate us or insulate us from any surprises or emergencies. Just allows us to plan for those. It's usually comprised of educated estimates, and I always try to caution people about this, right? It's us trying to look forward based on what we know about past expenditures and revenues, using our expertise to tell you what the future looks like. And it's effective really when it encompasses a short period, and so we never really go out more than 5 years. It's not detailed, it's a summary, it's conservative, but it's a really good practice, and our bond rating agencies really look favorably on us doing this type of exercise. So we have, I say 5, but it's really more like 4 major categories of revenues. It's the real estate and personal property taxes, intergovernmental aid, local receipts, and miscellaneous revenue. We work with our committee to do our revenue projections, identifying funds that are available, reviewing trends and anomalies, what's changed, why is it changed, did it just change for this one time, or is this something we can count on moving forward? And that's work that we're just now completing. And I just want to run through what our big drivers are and how we do this. And so our real estate and property taxes actually account for 76% of all of the revenues the town receives annually. It is by far the largest portion of our revenue. And as we just know from our hearing, we all know what the tax levy is. But it typically can raise 2.5% per Proposition 2.5, but it can rise more through 3 mechanisms. Some that we use here is debt and capital exclusions, which are temporary increases to our property taxes, an override, which is a permanent increase to our tax levy limit, and then new growth, which are taxes that are attributed to the value of new construction and are added permanently in that year and for the years moving forward. And so typically, we project new growth around $650,000 a year. And that's based on conversations that we have with the building inspector and the planning department to determine what's coming in, what they're seeing, in order to educate us and give us those numbers. Our next biggest revenue source is intergovernmental revenue, which comprises 11% of all of our revenues received annually. And those are things like Chapter 70, unrestricted general government aid, veterans benefits, things you would see on the cherry sheet. Those can vary from year to year. And we're estimating those to increase by about 2% this year with similar adjustments in future years. Other things that you may see is like state-owned land, any money we get for state-owned land. Those are really the big ones. The veterans benefits, it's a 75% reimbursement from the state. So we get 75% of our budget reimbursed. I think it's very conservative, yes.
And past performance tells us,
Mhm.
I mean, what is our past, normally what we get past performance from the cherry sheet?
So this
Is it-
year, we're what, more like over 3? A little over 3 this year.
But it's smart to be conservative
yeah.
on that, not.
Lynn and I share that philosophy, and so that's a good thing, right? You don't want to be caught overestimating any of these because you really then will have a shortfall. And so we try to be as conservative as possible when we're doing these revenue metrics.
And it builds up your reserves,
Right.
and it all falls to the bottom.
Yep, of course. Then we also have local receipts, which also accounts for about 11% of all the revenues, and that's our local fees, fines, permits, and other charges. So things that are included there are motor vehicle excise, meals and lodging taxes, any pilots we have, penalties, license, permits, host community fees. And these are another thing that we budget very conservatively to account for changes, because you may have something that will be happening for 5 years in a row, and then all of a sudden that falls off. And so we have to be very careful as we watch these. We have 2 pilots, it's the Housing Authority and solar. We also include ambulance receipts in our local receipts amount, and we're anticipating this to increase by 3% this year. And then finally, we have our operating transfers and other revenue, and that's about 2% of our income, and so that's actually our indirect cost from our enterprise funds. So it's transfers that are made from our enterprise fund into the general budget, typically for things like health insurance, et cetera. And so this is just a chart showing, obviously, that taxes is really our biggest revenue builder for our budget. And these are our revenue projections, moving out from fiscal year '21 through fiscal year '25. I caution everyone not to rely on them, but it's approximately 3% per year. Some years are 3.08, some are 3.07, but approximately 3% a year. So you can see that right now we're estimating fiscal year '21, which is the budget that we're about to start building, at total revenue of $104,729,936.
So in no growth, you didn't consider Amazon in there at all?
We don't think Amazon will come on in fiscal year '21. They're still undergoing their permits, and they won't go on until they get their occupancies.
Yeah.
So if anything, fiscal year '22 or maybe fiscal year '23.
And still you haven't?
No, so
projected
I typically, and I think Lynn agrees, would not project revenue or project new growth until they have permits in hand.
So now those permits, they'll generate fees.
Right.
And so that's, even though prior to the occupancy, they can't have an occupancy permit until
Yep.
they do all the building and construction, and all of those fees are generated earlier on, and you still wouldn't include that as well?
No,
Okay.
because it's a one-time revenue. And so you
Okay.
typically don't include any one-time revenue in your forecast, right? And technically, those fees are supposed to all go to offset the inspections, right?
So my philosophy when I meet with the Revenue Fixed Cost Committee is, we look at prior years, but I back out any of the larger projects that would have generated any large building permits, because that's an anomaly in that particular year. So it's hard to do an average or a trend analysis with those big projects within those years. So you back them out and do the trends, and then it helps you to keep level, because it's a one-time boost of revenue in that particular year.
And that's what builds free cash for us, is those
Right.
one-time boosts. And so then we work on forecasting our expenditures. And so expenses include everything that we do to make the town operate, right? Our education, our general government, public safety, public works, OPEB, benefits, capital, everything. And we really talk about what are the budget drivers? What are our knowns? What are our fixed costs? So we can account for insurance. We can account for any collective bargaining agreements that we already have or that we're currently negotiating. We account for step increases, because we know if we have steps within the different CBAs, we can account for those. We can figure those out in advance. Contracts for services. So if we have an IT software management contract that goes out 5 years, we can forecast that because we know that cost, or trash. And then we really think about the need for increased services or changes due to changes in populations, demographics, priorities, or bylaw changes, right? So if we know, for instance, that the town's gonna pass a bylaw that's gonna require us to have do more health inspections, we try to account for that. We try to think about that when we build these if we can. And a lot of what we're doing is trying to maintain that same stability we're doing when we set the tax rate, right? So we try to be as conservative as we can in building our budget and in creating our forecast while still providing the services that our community deserves. And so this is our expenditure forecast. We're looking at increases about health insurance are about 6% this year, 7% in future years, 8% per year for our pension appropriation, which we're funding through fiscal year 36. General government typically around 2%, schools typically around 3.6%, public safety around 3%. And so, you can see how we build this. And then this is our estimated retirement appropriation, so you can see the increases really being around 7.5888, and then starting to tail off a little bit more and getting closer to the 4% range as we get closer to the end of that payment, which will be exciting for the community because all of a sudden we'll have this huge, huge money that we won't have to pay anymore. And I always say we should shift it over to OPEB, but that's the conversation for another day. And then this is a graph of our expenditures. You can see that about 50% of our budget is the schools, 5% is debt service, 5% public works. Health insurance is about 12%, public safety about 11%.
So the health insurance is not, and I don't answer to this, but just to let people know at home, health insurance is not dedicated to the department that.
No.
It's separate, it's
Yes.
lumped all together.
Yep,
Because
one
when
big
we
budget.
calculate actually how much each department costs, it is a little bit different than that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And the other personal benefits, which can be confusing for people, is things that are like insurance, workers' comp, life insurance, unemployment, payroll taxes, or other things that fall into the other personal benefits, which can be confusing for people because they're like, wait, you have a benefits line item, but we have all different types of liability insurance, et cetera, that fall into those. And then this is the final kind of 5-year forecast, which does show you, and made me very nervous because I'm not used to it, but Lynn tells me this is how we do it. It does show you the the deficit in future years. I was like,
Always
wait.
makes us very nervous
This
every
is
time.
I got so anxious. But yeah, so this is our deficit in future years that, in fiscal year 21, we'll be working to bridge. And in future years as well, just continuing to be very diligent in our budgeting, in our hiring, in our bargaining, finding cost savings, regionalizing things so that we can bridge these gaps as much as we can. And revenues will continue maybe at times to have new revenues that we didn't expect before, and that will help. But
I know that was a past remark as a joke, but how, I know you're not used to doing it this way. What's the way that you would be used to doing it?
so a lot of communities will try to find a way to bridge that gap in advance. The best practice really is to show it this way, so I'm kind of joking, but the best practice is really to show the deficit because it is true, right? In the future, we're looking at some years that are going to be hard. And we recognize that and we know that, so we'll have to start planning for that now, and that's why we do this, right? So that we can recognize that we're gonna have those issues in future years.
Do we ever go back and just rate the performance of these forecasts? Like, so if we go back 5 years ago and look at what we were projecting in FY '20, yeah, do we ever go back
I
and?
mean, I have a schedule that says what the original appropriation was versus what the actual is.
But I'm just talking about this forecast.
I was wondering how on
Yeah.
the money we are with our
Yeah,
guesses.
how,
Yeah,
how,
I could
how
look at
accurate
that.
are our forecasts?
I haven't, but I could look at it. I mean,
To
all
show
the
that-
data's there, all I'd have to just pull up and
It would be-
compare it to the
it would be very
5-year
interesting to
forecast. It
look
would be
at.
interesting.
I mean, we do this every year, so like.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have it.
Someone at
Yeah,
home right
I
now
have
could be
the
doing it
history.
for
It
us.
would be-
Right,
Yeah,
we
I
can,
know.
Actually, yeah.
I
It's
probably
all-
have the
it's in
data.
budget
Right.
books. It's in every budget book.
That's right, they
so-
probably
if
are
there
right now.
was- If we were consistently off in one area, that would be telling.
Yeah, it would be.
So-
You're right. Yep.
Well, it's probably always off on the revenues because we're very conservative.
Right.
So I mean,
And that's
I
why
don't
we
think
do
that
it.
if I mean, from my high level guess,
From the
from my
chart
knowledge,
lady, yeah.
I think that it's not that we're off on the expense estimate. We're
revenues.
low on the revenues, and that's how we bridge the gap every year.
Yep.
I mean, for the most part.
You're right.
Right, like, well, for instance, we can know that last year, we estimated new growth at 650, but it ended up being
Being
1.3.
1.3.
Right.
Right,
Exactly.
and that would have bridged most of the gap for last
Yeah.
year, right?
And I feel like since I've been on the Board of Selectmen anyway, that's what it's been. But it's only been a couple of years.
Interesting, especially if it was a pattern of being off or maybe a little bit too,
Or maybe doing quite well in areas that we might want to,
It'd be good to know.
we always go to town meeting with balanced budgets, so.
Yeah.
we do, we work very hard.
And consensus budgets, too. Agreed on.
It's good,
Great.
really good.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you.
No.
Thank you,
Okay.
You've been busy.
We have been, yeah.
I mean, how long have you been here, Mrs.?
3
Town
months.
Manager? 3 months. This is a lot
3
of
months
work.
today, right? I think so.
This is a lot of work.
That is, yeah.
Okay. So we're not taking a vote on that, but our next, next topic will be an update on Columbia Gas, but we'll give you a minute to get back to your
Yes.
seat.
Should we,
Let's-
did we do the minutes already?
We could do that if you want, while Melissa's settling herself. So we have not done the approval for the minutes from November 25th. Did everybody get a chance to review them, and can I hear a motion?
Move the Board of Selectmen approve the open session minutes of November 25th, 2019 as presented.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Back to Columbia Gas?
Back to Columbia Gas.
So I did meet with Columbia Gas last week, because they wanted to let us know that they are working on the repressurization of the line. And so if you remember correctly, I let you know a couple weeks ago that, when they had that gas leak in Lawrence that was caused by the contractor, they had to depressurize the line that had about 321 miles of gas, and they were at about half of where it should be. So DPU has been letting them slowly increase the pressure back up. They were at about 55 pounds when we talked with them last week. They still have a significant way to go. But one thing that I wanted to let residents know is that they are still doing the leak evaluation. And so they have been going to people's houses, often without much notice, because what they're doing is they're doing 2 ways to evaluate. One is with a specialized leak truck that they're driving around overnight. It's actually a Jeep, and it's 1,000 times more sensitive than the meter that they use when they walk. So they're doing twofold. They're doing that analysis as well as a walking analysis, looking for any leaks. And so they're still in town. You'll still see them both driving and walking, because they have to repair all of these leaks before the DPU will allow them to continue to bring the pressure up. Right now, the pressure is so high that it can withstand negative temperatures, which was the issue before, that if it started to feel like less than -0, -1, it really wouldn't be able to handle the system. Now they're up to about -15. And so they're more comfortable with where we are, and obviously not -15 in temperature, but feels like -15 in temperature. And so they were meeting with DPU on Thursday, and I haven't heard yet, but their plan was to continue to ask to have the slow process of building the pressure back up, which is the wisest way to do it. They've been keeping in contact with Chief McCarthy, and letting him know whenever they were going to be increasing pressure so that we would be ready. But so far, it's been going very smoothly. There was 12 leaks that had been outstanding for the last few weeks as we've been going through kind of the compliance checks, and all of those leaks have now been repaired as well. And so there has been progress, but I just wanted to update you on that. And the moratorium is still in place, so they're not allowed to do any other work besides new lines to new construction and this compliance work here in town. And so as we continue to get updates, I'll continue to update you and the public, but that's the most recent update.
Interesting discussions about the use of cast iron, and that we're an anomaly as a state nationally, in that we rely mainly on cast iron for the delivery of gas to homes and businesses.
Interesting.
I think it was Brookline that already, moratorium probably isn't the right word, they outright banned the expansion of in-ground gas delivery to residences and businesses. And so, like, what tools do we as a board have moving forward, not for the banning, but for managing the type of equipment that's put underground for gas delivery, to make sure it's consistent or safe with our neighbors? Where I know this wasn't caused per se by cast iron, but a lot of the failures since then, the leaks, are caused by the weakness that cast iron represents.
Mhm.
And so, can you help us better understand what are those
Yeah.
tools that are at our disposal to?
I mean, a lot of it's going to be lobbying, working with DPU, because they regulate most of the work that is done and license a lot of it. And so I think working closely with them is going to be very important. There is a couple of different legislative actions that are pending at the State House, that I think we could work more closely on. I have not seen the Brookline model. I could take a look at that and see if that's something that we want to explore for town meeting here as well, or if there's any other metrics. We do things internally within the town where we set standards for construction, for instance, for trenches, et cetera, and that's another thing that we could look into, is setting, minimum standards for gas companies.
Well, and for us as a board of selectmen specifically, we're asked to approve project by project a lot of times, and we saw it with National Grid, where National Grid had those double poles up so often, and we eventually hit a point where we had to use what tools we had at our disposal to force them to finally
And
address
we
things.
said, we're not doing any more permits till you fix this one, and there was
Yeah,
one
it's
that was
hard.
literally like this on
Yeah.
somebody's house.
So
And we'd
common.
asked for months,
For years.
And I
Um,
finally said, nope,
So,
and the rest of us went, yep, nope, so.
but we never have confronted that with gas. We confront, because you're looking at those double poles, but here we have something that we've identified as being a problem. And so, what are the tools in our arsenal? Like, I want to understand,
Yeah.
are we able to put that type of requirement on there as well? You're not getting a gas line unless you use this type of equipment, or you are up to this type of standard. It doesn't matter if DPU has set it at this.
Right.
The North Andover Board of Selectmen wants to bring it to this level.
Can I think about that and get back to you? I think it's very interesting.
I would expect you to answer it in the spot, but that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, at some point, we're going to have,
Moratorium will
Yeah.
end and we'll be back to work, right.
and they're going to be asking for permission, even if it's not necessary to that specific. We want permission to be able to access that easement. Well, I'm not voting to give you that access unless you're up to the safety standard that, the highest level of safety standard that we as a nation have. And I don't know that DPU is at that standard, given DPU has set that standard, right? And that's why we'd have to lobby them, but we technically don't if we use that tool.
Except in this,
Especially on the double polling, I believe that comes from the State House, and they have not been so inclined to
But we
mandate
could-
them.
But we could have actually continued to vote no. But it's like, but then then we're kind of cutting off our nose to spite our face. So I
Or new
always value-
business being set up or something, yeah.
Whereas you don't necessarily, as we've seen, if there are communities outright banning gas, gas is one of many options. You don't need gas to heat your home. You could go electric, you could go propane, you could go oil, and so we could just say to Columbia Gas, which requires people need electricity. People aren't really going off grid, but gas is a little bit different. Their business
Well,
model
I mean,
requires.
You
That's
can't tell
relative, you
per-
can't, you can't cut gas off, I mean,
You can't
I
tell
If
do
they-
miles
they
with
can't
gas.
do
If they come in and ask us to put a gas line in, I mean, by us saying no to gas, there are a plethora of different
Oh,
options.
for new construction, but still, that's gonna,
But it's
But
it's
even
not
at
like
that,
power where if
you're
we say no to
limiting-
National Grid, that house doesn't have power. If we say no to gas, they're gonna go find another option. I mean, we're not all represented, we don't all use gas, but we all use National Grid.
The only thing is, then we're limiting the desires of our citizens
Right,
too.
I don't think you can.
We get
That's
your
up to
point.
us as individuals,
we
that's
get
why I wanna
to-
understand the legality. Are
That- I mean,
are
we get your
allowed to do
point,
that?
though.
Because I mean, I certainly then don't. I mean, that's up to us as individuals, whether we wanna vote to approve those
I'm fully
projects.
supportive of the idea of us
Standard.
requiring a higher level of standard in order to get your yes, but I mean, I don't think we can say.
I
And
mean,
some
there
of
may be
it's
other tools
timing.
that we
Yeah.
can use.
Using that poll example, the timing was good. What they were asking for was not urgent. Urgent enough, but not so urgent that we were hurting somebody. So a
Yeah.
lot of it's got to do with the timing of that. But
Okay, let me think about that and
Yeah,
I'll get back to you.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I would ask the discretion of the chair if we could move licensing above consent, since I know we have some people in the audience here
Sure.
for the licensing, and to make them sit through.
Yeah,
the-
so I'll use my prerogative as chair to take licensing out of order and take it in front of the consent items, so I'll hear a motion to go into licensing.
Move to go into licensing.
Second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. All right, so first we have a request of China Blossom to remain open until 2 AM on New Year's Eve. I don't think, do we have anyone here from China Blossom?
They're
I
not
don't
here.
think so, yeah. I think we do this every year.
Yeah.
And they ask every year.
And they ask every
without
year,
incident,
and we
so.
never have an
Usually
incident.
2 AM? Or,
I think so,
yeah?
yeah,
Stop serving at 1, okay.
yeah. So, I mean, I would be
Madam
generally
Chair, I'll make a
support this.
motion that we grant the request from China Blossom to stay open until 2 AM on New Year's Eve.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next, we have a request of Sunjay, Inc., DBA Town Mart for a change of officers and stakeholder for a wine and malt package store liquor license at 260 Winthrop Avenue. Thank you.
Good evening, Jill Mann here on behalf of Sanjay. The company that owns and operates the mobile gas station down off of 114, and they do have a beer and wine license presently. The purpose of the request is actually to add an owner to the entity, which is wholly owned by Nitesh Patel. They are seeking to actually add Mukesh Patel to the license, and as you know, in order to do that, we have to come before this board for a modification of the license. In accordance with the rules of the ABCC and obviously the statute in this town, we did present to you all of the information relative to Mr. Patel. We gave you his citizenship information as well as filled out the application. Mr. Patel does hold another liquor license in the Commonwealth in Middleton, and the enterprise has never had any issues, they've never had any incidents, and now we're just simply seeking to add Mukesh as I said, a shareholder, and then also one of the directors and officers as well.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve that, move that the Board of Selectmen acting as licensing commissioners approve the request of Sunjing DBA Town Mart for a change of officers and stockholders for a wine and malt package store license at 260 Winthrop Avenue.
Second?
Any further questions or questions?
You might have said that, but I didn't know that you were applying it to that. So your place of business in Middleton, has there been any incidents there?
No.
No, okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you
Motion
very much.
passes.
Appreciate your time.
Congratulations. Thank you. Sorry for the wait.
No, thank you for taking us on board, we appreciate it.
And the next item is the annual license renewal. So hopefully you guys had a chance to look at this 20-page document, which is quite lengthy. We have a note from our assistant town clerk with some of the major changes, so I'll just read them to have them on the record. Walgreens DBA Rite Aid has permanently closed, so they're making arrangements to transfer their license to another location. The businesses that are not renewing.
In town?
No, I
Obviously
don't
in
think
town.
so, no.
Permanently closed and to another location, but they're not specific?
Yeah.
I think they mean they're trying to transfer license to another store in town.
Oh, yeah?
That's what I would think.
Yeah, you
Oh,
could
to
do
the
it when
Walgreens,
I would think
perhaps?
Yeah, because it
Mm.
wouldn't apply to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
But they're
we'll
not
get, we'll get
requesting.
that at
That
another
request
will
request,
come
right?
before
That's
you.
not here, so that's
Okay.
just a point to make, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the businesses, just for our information, that are not renewing for 2020 are Chama Grill at 115 Main Street, La Bottega at 1820 Turnpike Street, John's Auto Sales, 17 Mass Ave, Merid Limo, 14 Royal Crest Drive, and Crossway Transit at 30 Mass Ave.
So if La Bottega doesn't renew, that means that we have a full liquor license carryout that's available. Be interesting to see how long that sits on the shelf.
Good point. So, in regards to this section 12, the building inspector and fire chief have signed off on most of the establishments regarding certificates of inspection. The fire chief and building inspector continue to work with them on compliance. Valid copies of the certificates are in the town clerk's office. All appropriate paperwork regarding workers' compensation insurance and alcohol liability insurance is likewise in the office files. except for North Andover Restaurant, DBA Rolf's, which I believe we are still trying to track down. We've had several calls out to them to try and
Track down what?
get that information. Workers' compensation insurance and alcohol liability insurance paperwork.
They
So-
also haven't scheduled their inspections with the building department or the fire department.
So to be clear, their license will lapse.
So, yeah, that's an issue. I mean, I don't see that we can renew a license without those
I mean,
items.
we could motion to renew it pending.
Pending, like we did last year.
Pending the completion, I believe that's what we did last year
Yeah.
around their
Yeah.
payments, yeah. And then, I mean, I guess, I know obviously we have two people in the audience to talk about the license for the Stephen Coolidge place, so maybe I'll raise that point in particular and ask them if they want to make their comments. That's an entertainment license. I think you'll see it on page 18 or 20. I don't think we have a lot of detail in the document, but just to share, because I did pull it up. It's very broad. They have had currently an entertainment license for basically 365 days a year from 9 to 9, like all-day license. So I think that's up for discussion. I will welcome public comment regarding that particular license.
Can I ask, well, shoot, approach this just so that I better understand. So the entertainment license that we give a lot of entertainment licenses.
We do.
But sometimes it's, a Dunkin' Donuts being able to have a TV
TV, yeah.
Mhm.
requires an entertainment license. Is there a distinction between that category and the category that we apply to, like
Music.
the Stevens Coolidge House? There's
I
no-
don't think so.
From a legal, so it's the same license.
And I'm questioning why we have that. It seems to me that live or music and dancing would be a different category than having a TV. I don't know why we do that. I don't know if anyone has any.
So hypothetically, because I know that, I don't think that neighbors are motivated to attend our meetings and sit here for 90 minutes because the music is playing inside the Stevens Coolidge House.
Right.
My guess is they're motivated because it's playing
Outdoor.
outside.
Yeah.
So the same license that grants them the ability to have these larger events that certainly infringe on neighbors, like Heavenly Donuts could just on their sidewalk all of a sudden just start playing a band by the same license we give them that they have a TV in there. I mean, they could just decide to.
Yeah.
Well, no, because it's
It
spelled out
states
live
on the-
music.
But it actually doesn't, I was actually gonna ask, I don't know, Lori, if you know the answer to this. When I requested from Town Hall the actual license, it doesn't specify music and dancing.
That's what I'm asking. Is like the
It
what does the
just
license
says
actually say?
entertainment license, like it doesn't say live music and dancing by patrons on the license.
So there is a statute that penalizes that.
I mean, I didn't wanna call you guys and say, can you pull every one of these licenses so I can look at the language? But it was interesting to me to see on this packet that we had specified things, TV, amplifier, whatever, when I didn't see that on the Stephen Coolidge license. And I guess the further question is, I mean, can we not just grant entertainment license on a one-day basis? Like we do liquor licenses, one-day liquor license. I mean, can we do a one-day entertainment license and just provide the license at the time for the event? So we give a license for the Father's Day Bash or whatever it is.
You can, you've done that before, and I believe Stevens Coolidge requested it before for some reason, and I think we brought this up last year. The
Mm.
one-day license is the same fee as a yearly license, so they said, why am I gonna pay $100 for a one day? I'll apply for the yearly, because it's the same cost.
So how long have they had this? Is this the first time? No, this is a renewal, so it's not the first
So
time.
last year they applied for the 1-year license rather than a one-day license, and I think they got the previous year.
Who sets those fees? It's kind of the silly thing that we've overlooked, that we have the annual license and the daily license is the same rate?
Their bylaw.
Oh, so we actually don't, that's not a fee that we, I was
Yeah,
gonna say. I feel like we-
75-5.
Okay.
I stand corrected, I pulled up the license that they have, it does say live music and dancing is Xed. There's not other boxes that say TV or whatever that's not Xed, so I don't know what this form normally looks like or whatever, but it does say live music and dancing on the one they currently have. I mean, I don't know why there needs to be a license anyway that says at 8 a.m. in the morning that you could have live music and dancing. It seems a little silly to have it be so broad,
Well,
Monday through Sunday.
They have, well, they,
Yeah, okay.
no, well, they have their yoga, right? They have
Well,
yoga
that's-
programs, that's
That's
music.
It's not
Live
live music and dancing.
Well, it could be a form of
Okay.
dancing. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how broad that has to be.
Well,
Um,
I guess we can hear from the neighbors that may want to.
Whatever is on there is what was on their application.
So it's what
So
they check
they
off.
applied with certain hours or days or whatever. So when you approved their initial application, and I don't have it in front of me, but it must have had those hours on there. So that's what gets carried over to the license.
All right, yes, I'll welcome public comments since we're.
Kelly Cormier, 169 Amber Street. I'm one of the abutters of the Stevens Coolidge Place. I don't want to, I'm assuming, I know I sent my email late, but if you were able to read or not, so I'll go through. the
Please
whole-
summarize, because it came in very late.
It came in very late, I'm sorry. So
what?
I reiterated a lot of what was in the note that one of my other neighbors, Melissa Rivers, had sent out last week, a note that we had sent to the planning board. Really asking for, one, we don't think that the events happening at Stevens Coolidge are within zoning. There are zoning violations. We've asked the building commissioner to look into that. Would ask you to make sure that that someone looks into those violations for what's happening currently before an additional licenses get issued. If you don't agree, at least think through some conditions in order to reduce the nuisance to abutters. Some of those are so the event should be centered to the core of the property to minimize the nuisance to abutters. Right now, for example, they're right on the edge of their property, facing our property. There's live music or amplified music outside that can be heard at my home, inside my home. We had talked before about those needing to be at the core of the property, especially with the amplified music. That's not happening, so perhaps a condition on any entertainment licenses.
I thought they moved the stage to the other side because of a request you had prior.
Yeah, they moved the stage, but the speakers are still there. The speakers are.
going towards 125. That's a big distance.
I'll be honest, I haven't gone over to look at the speakers, but I know what I can hear in my home. I know when my daughter goes, "Mommy, why is the music so loud in the house?" Right, like, there's loud music pointing towards my home. It's not 1 day a week, it's 5 days a week, 4 days a week in a residential zone. So I'd ask for some comments on that. Also, the vendors that are getting used there during these occasions, they're for-profit vendors. I believe they're commercial vendors, which is not part of this zone, the R3 zone. So I'd ask that to get looked into as a violation. I also look to a limit to the number of events that you issue. Like it was just mentioned, this is a full year license for 365 days a year in a residential zone. Would ask to look at that, what should be happening in a residential zone, anywhere else in town. Having parties for 500 people, 3-4 nights a week. Is there a way to reduce that? Maybe say one night a week? Some condition to reduce that amount. 5 nights a week is a lot in a residential zone. I don't think it's appropriate for zoning. Sorry, I'm trying to read this at the same time here. And I lost my email. Do you remember the other ones? Oh, and not including pictures of a butter's home on their social media or any of their marketing materials. Not putting pictures of my house to promote their commercial events would be helpful. That's it. Just really looking to, we don't think what they're doing is per zoning. So it really would look for your help and assistance to, one, make sure that's what's happening is what should be happening in our R3 zone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Has anybody looked into the,
Melissa Rivers, 179 Andover Street. I don't want to be redundant. I mean, I think that that's the issue. I mean, clearly, a yoga event with soft music and that's quiet in there is not what we're objecting to. I mean, it's really the amplified music and that sort of thing. So I agree. I don't know if there's a way to differentiate from that. Maybe it is having them come for specific events. We're obviously fighting the bigger picture here with them on some things, but certainly having a license, when I ever found out there was a license for 365 days, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for live music and dancing, that just doesn't seem reasonable to me in a residential neighborhood. I mean, I don't live right next door. I live a street and one house removed, and I can hear the music in my house. That's loud. And that just isn't right, and it certainly shouldn't be permitted on a regular basis. So that is my fundamental issue with it. I just want to make sure it is limited in nature, and in addition to all the concerns that we've said in the past. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, my feeling is, I personally am fully empathetic with the abutters' concerns. I mean, it is in the middle of, it's a residential zone, and it's a non-profit, and how we're providing a license 365 days a year that enables live music, often associated with a for-profit event. I mean, I know they're charging tickets and ticket sales and a lot of these things. I think I might have bought tickets for the Father's Day Bash, which was live music and whatnot. That just doesn't feel right to me, and I agree that on just a gut check level, it doesn't seem reasonable to me that we would provide a 365 days, 8 to 9 p.m. license. So for me, I feel we have to come up with some other option.
So just a caution. Under Chapter 140, Section 181, which governs this because it doesn't have a common vicular alcohol license, the statute actually lays out that there's a statutory presumption in favor of the grant of it. And so in order for you to deny it or make changes to it, the burden of proof is really on the licensing authority to determine why it should not be issued. And so there's basically needs to be on record a hearing that shows substantial evidence of anticipated public harm. So you have to basically make a determination that the issuance of the license would lead to the creation of a nuisance or would endanger public health, safety, or order. And it's very stringent in the determination of that. So you have to make the determination that it unreasonably increases pedestrian traffic in the area in which the premises are located, or, it doesn't have to be all three, it could be one, increases the incidence of disruptive conduct in the area in which the premises are located, or unreasonably increases the level of noise in the area in which the premises are located. It allows you to impose conditions, but the conditions can only relate to the compliance of those kind of three things, or to public safety, health, or order. Basically, you'd be taking guards against creation of a nuisance. So just advise you, if you're thinking about either one, a denial, or two, adding any contingencies or restrictions, we may want to have a conversation with Suzanne or even with counsel for the ABCC. It wouldn't even be the ABCC, with counsel in general, because I would hate to see us somehow step in it when there's kind of a statutory reason.
So
Madam
what you're
Chair.
saying, though, is that we don't have to make that determination tonight, but we could amend it with further study? Or is what we said tonight, that's it for the year?
I mean, I think you need to have a reason to amend it. If I was you, what I would do is perhaps issue a shorter license, a 1-month license, just in that case, and explain that you'd like to do further study, and then get the advice of counsel, or I can look into it further. I don't want to see you make any restrictions that may be in violation of Section 181.
I would like maybe a little bit more than a month because of the holidays.
Yeah, of course.
Well, from the month of January.
Right, because
So-
this expires the
So
31st.
they're licensed until the 31st.
That's right, I'm forgetting to add
So the January.
even the 2 weeks.
So, I mean, so if we were to talk about conditions, what would the neighbors be? So if we were to just spitball in here, if we were to say, you know, instead of 9 o'clock, starting at 9 AM and ending at 9 PM, if we were to do things like noon to 8 PM, are those some conditions that would be acceptable? Or, you know, and I don't wanna go down too down that path.
Well, Madam Chair, because, we kind of experienced this with another license holder at one point, where the decibels,
Yep.
the volume from one of a for-profit
I
entity
brought up there.
was so great that we put conditions on their
Yeah.
license that they had to address that. And
Mhm.
DEP does have certain standards, right,
Mhm.
for decibels. And so why couldn't we, as part of our fact-finding, determine whether or not the typical events at the site, do they exceed that? I mean, I don't think that, I have to say, the abutters, plural, have consistently been at these meetings and always very polite and I think understanding of our packed agendas. And despite the frustration that I know you're feeling at home, I just feel like that they've extended us an incredible courtesy as their elected representatives. I'd like to understand just exactly how that impact is happening at their property. And then I have a side question, because the point is often raised about this being a residential zone. Hypothetically, could either one of them apply for the same all-year entertainment license for their own property?
Well, I think the difference is that, the Dover Amendment, right, is that the Stevens Coolidge, because they're more than 50% educational, claims the Dover Amendment. And so,
But that's-
right,
okay.
so they're exempt from zoning. Some of the things, so I'm just looking at
Can you define though what over 50% of what?
their programming or their mission. In order to qualify for the Dover Amendment, your argument is that you're over 50% of your programming or your mission in general is education related, and my understanding is that they've argued that they fall under the Dover Amendment.
So is
But
that?
who makes that final determination?
The building inspector does.
And have we asked him
Yeah.
to make that determination?
We certainly can, but I believe, my understanding is historically, any work that they've done, and I can ask him to make the determination in writing, any work that they've done has been done under that, which is how they've been basically doing work in existing in a residential zone. That's my understanding of it. One thing I will tell you is that some of the conditions that they explain here are conditions that certainly are very feasible, like a police detail to handle traffic, a cutoff time for amplified music, right? So figuring out reasonable times for amplified music and including those in your conditions. Bathroom facilities that are in reasonable place, right? So certainly things that I think we could carve out. And one thing that may make really good sense as we go through this process is speaking with the neighbors and also with the Stevens Coolidge and trying to come to some kind of compromise license. Might be in our best interest too.
But even
So-
just strategically placing the entertainment where the music is headed towards a big empty field and a highway, which is quite a ways away, could make a big, I don't know where they are
Right.
placed. I've been there myself. I know a couple.
They used to be placed right next to Kelly's home.
Yeah, see,
And
that's
then,
not good.
well, that used to be, and then Kelly came in and requested them to move them, and I believe they moved to the other side. But I understand what you're saying now, the speakers, I wasn't aware of that, but I know they moved the stage to the other side of the facility, of the property, where there isn't any residential located. But apparently, there's still a noise issue with the speakers.
I don't want to move off the Dover Amendment, so my follow-up question to your response is, identifying 50% of raw programs, so I do 100 programs a year, so at least 50 of those programs, regardless of who turns out, are educational, or is it 50% of the attendees are there for educational purposes? So let's say 99 of the 100 events they have a year are educational, but only 5 people attend each one of those events. But then that other one event attracts 7,000 people.
Right.
So it's 50% of what?
Some of it's mission-based too, right? A lot of the time, that's what we'll see. We'll see it be more mission-based than even event-based. For instance, I've seen dog shelters that do educational components receive the Dover Amendment. It's actually fairly broad, and it's an argument that they typically make. Then the building inspector has to make a determination based on those arguments, and a lot of the time it will be like a study of the website, or a study of if it's a nonprofit, or which typically it is, a study of what their mission statement is, or a study of the papers that they filed with the Secretary of State. Typically, it involves kind of analysis of all of that.
But even still, with all of that, the educational piece.
Yeah.
If in turn though, the educational program is only servicing a few hundred people each month. Well, a smaller number of events are attracting tens of thousands conceivably, and I'm not, that sounds almost thousands of people, not tens of thousands, but they have a lot of visitors over the course of the year, and we see a lot of really robust events all year long that are appealing. I think a lot of people come from outside North Andover to go to them, but it's clear every time they're before us, it's because they've got some pretty big events happening, and I've not seen many educational-oriented events that require excessive porta
Yeah.
potty
Well,
presence. for instance.
But
Yeah.
does the Dover Amendment with educational, is that also part of freedom of speech? Is it somewhat all tied in together? I mean, as you know, teachers who have tenure can teach certain things that maybe other people might not appreciate, but they're tenured, but it comes under freedom of speech. So I don't know.
Can we just, at this point, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily relevant to our
Right.
decision on the license. Can we ask you to look
Yeah,
into
I'm happy to.
the Dover Amendment in terms of, can we get that verified? I think a lot of us would argue we don't see it being educational, so,
So for instance,
as a
though,
majority.
at the program they have going on right now, right, and I don't know why I can't think of what it's called, Winter Lights, you know what it's called, for sure. Winter Lights, they have this storybook aspect of it, right, where they have local artists come in and do a rendering, and I'm gonna think, they're gonna argue that there is an educational element to it, right, and so these are kind of the funny lines that, right. And so, yes, I
But they
will
have
meet.
programs like all the time. I mean, if you
Yes.
go by, I live in that area, you go by, they have on the list, they have, you know, their centerpiece making, their
Yeah.
their
Flower
flower
wreath
They
cutting.
do, it's to,
All
it's
of
to
those
the
are
point,
events.
10 people go to those and 5,000
yeah, I
people
mean,
go to the other, it's a
obviously that
little
would be a
hard to
total
say, yeah.
You know, it would be way more than 50% that are
Right.
not education,
Yeah.
if it was attendance-based. So we need to
Right.
find out whether it's program-based or attendance-based.
Right.
I'm guessing it's program-based.
I
I
am
would
too.
assume it's going to be
It would be
program.
helpful because again,
Yeah.
you don't care about the number of programs, it's the number of
Right.
people. I mean, I don't know why, what's to stop them as a neighbor? This is why I'm asking with the entertainment piece too and the flexibility, because what's to stop them as a neighbor to say, okay, you're having a holiday event, but you're not respecting my space with that music, let me turn a speaker on and have it be punk rock, I mean, that's kind of the impasse it sounds like they're at, and I feel like we can help mediate it and help explore alternatives, because
I think so too.
If we remember correctly, that's what happened at the other facility.
that
Right.
is absolutely what happened at the other facility.
So,
right?
so let's say then, I mean,
A 1-month license.
I'm going to suggest that we approve a 1-month license so that we can have a working period. We'll look into measuring the decibels and then working collaboratively to try and come up with something.
Right, I think we need to get the license requester in here and have a conversation with them as well and see,
Yeah.
you know, what they're willing to be, you know,
Right.
to be good neighbors. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
key, right? We need to make sure everyone they're good neighbors, and
Right.
if they haven't been living up to that standard, then we need to kind of hold them accountable for that.
Okay, I would also like to have a discussion about Stevens Estate.
I would too.
Okay.
I think that we have the liquor license on here, if I'm not mistaken, so we had voted that we were not going to renew that, but obviously I guess you're making a suggestion that you would like to.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if it was the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, it's all a blur at this point. I had asked if you would consider doing the license again for 1 year while the long-term committee does its work. Namely because I think it's one of the major revenue sources for the estate. And if we don't do that, then I think that it kind of throws a wrench in their current business plan, and it would require me to start offsetting with the tax levy pretty immediately. And I think that it would be beneficial to keep the license for the next year while they do their work, but knowing that we've put restrictions on the taking of cash.
Any other questions? We did discuss this in a previous meeting, and I think we kind of
So,
all landed.
Well, I have one thing that, were you going to talk to this exact same issue, because I have a different aspect of this that I'd like to.
The license, so my question more was, so it's funny, I think myself and Selectman Nobley, our memory was jogged that when this was first discussed, and you're at a disadvantage because you weren't here, there was initially some light conversation months ago about, are we even allowed to sell alcohol? And it was brought up again, the irony was it was brought up by somebody who I think disagreed with the Board of Selectmen's position at town meeting, and yet agrees with our current position of not having a liquor license, which is that this individual's research says government can't sell alcohol. Now, it's a broad statement to make, especially when we live just a stone's throw away from New Hampshire, and they are living proof that that is a factually incorrect statement. However, it did make me want to ask, are we at risk, or is there something that, do we have it in black and white that we are fully in compliance to sell alcohol the way that we do?
I've never been told that we cannot. I've never seen anything that says that governments cannot. Laurie, have you ever seen anything?
I thought town council weighed in on it, but I
Oh.
can't be
That's, so that was, it was funny, it was like a blast
right, wasn't it?
from the, it was like, wow, that was only a few months ago, but really it was something we discussed probably back in April, and I couldn't find anything in my emails searching for it.
Yeah, she knows we're
I'd have to look
asking to
into it.
keep the license. She didn't say anything to me about not.
Again, the way
I
that the
thought
statement was
the-
made, it was made with a lot of certainty, but it was like,
Right.
of course, that's not,
Yeah.
And
not,
referenced, Andover, right?
yeah, it was an, it was an interesting basis. Again, this person, despite, again, feeling that the town should continue to own, they, again, were very adamantly opposed to what was proposed at town meeting, and yet very adamantly, against reinstating the license for legal reasons, and so I was just curious if that had been
Yeah, no one has said
thought of,
anything
because
to
I can
me.
remember, vaguely I remember that conversation happening
Right.
back in when we put the first moratorium on.
As I recall, the two main reasons for us not renewing the license was
Risk.
the cash and the liability of.
That was what
serving
we
alcohol.
did, but then this person brought up something that, regardless of what your opinions are, it wasn't me, it wasn't me.
Well,
for
we need a
rude,
legal
but-
opinion on that then, we need
Yeah.
a valid legal opinion on that,
Well, that's,
I think, if that was the case.
just as
But I
a
mean,
side
if
note.
Suzanne knows that we requested the license and she didn't say anything, then I don't
No,
think
that
that
being,
there must be a legal issue, otherwise.
that being said, I'm in favor of reinstating it because,
As am
again,
I.
one of the reasons that we did not want, one of the reasons why I personally would have liked to have seen a different arrangement with what we as a town have with that facility is because I don't wanna see us accessing cash that should be used for public safety or education or DPW and using it to supplement or subsidize that facility. And so right now, I don't wanna cut off I feel like I've used this already this evening, but I don't wanna cut off our nose to spite our face. I don't wanna see us not have a license in place that had typically been in place
I agree.
and end up harming other services.
Right.
That's,
I mean, I can certainly research it and check with Suzanne, and if, for any reason I'm missing something, we'll pull it. But I haven't seen anything.
Having said that, this sort of ties in a little bit to what you were saying. On the fee that's associated with this, other town bodies, we waive their fees. And I think the $3,000 would certainly come in handy to the Stevens estate. But whether it be a building permit fee or other fees, we tend to waive that. And I think in this particular case, especially considering all that's going on, it would be, we should follow that same practice and waive the $3,000 fee. Because it's just going,
I'm surprised we even charge them.
Yeah.
yeah, it's not
We-
there.
Do we actually charge them? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Out of the revolving.
Unless there's some reason, because it's an enterprise, that we must, but I don't see that that would necessarily be the case, because I believe we've waived building permit fees on
We're not
water
required
and
to.
sewer or whatever, so.
We're not required to.
We waived the building permit fees, but wasn't there a recent I agree with you generally, but wasn't there a, conversation we had recently, and someone's gonna have to remind me of what it was, but we were going to not charge a fee, and then like a town department a fee,
Yeah,
and then
it
we
was-
said, oh no, we should charge it because it pays for X, and so
There's
Right,
actual
it
work
was the
being done.
whole enterprise.
it was saying the enterprise
Enterprise.
fund should pay the revolving fund because
Actual work is. being
actual
spent.
work is being done or whatever.
But there's
I
really
think we
not
talked
actual
I
work
mean,
on
in
this
this
one.
case.
we talked about it, and I believe the example that was used was the water department, and
Mhm.
how, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is the actual arrangement, but it was, we didn't charge them building fees, but in turn, they don't actually charge us for municipal consumption of water, right? I think that's it.
It might have been something like that.
Yeah, you were talking about.
Well, we're not going
We
to-
actually
We're not
talked-
gonna be drinking this kind of water.
Well, so I see it as, I understand why, because it's our municipal building, why we wouldn't charge those type of fees to an enterprise account when it's building related. I mean, this is service, this is the whole point, is this is part of the business model, right? If that was a private business, this is what,
Well, I would question, like,
I
so for
don't know.
example, we're buying insurance, related to holding this license,
Yep.
right? So is that $3,000 paying for that insurance?
No, that's separate, right?
If this is just compensating for the town clerk office job for managing and issuing the license and whatnot, I don't know, given the situation with the estate, I guess I think we should waive it, just to.
I think we should. I don't see a harm in it.
Yeah, I don't
It's not
either.
going to really change.
We're not making like a blanket decision for all buildings or all,
No.
whatever, it's a one-time thing,
It's a
given the
totally-
current situation,
yeah.
so. Okay, those were the only things, I guess, that I wanted to specifically discuss. Are there other things in this list of 20 pages of licenses that you guys wanted to discuss?
Did you want to weigh in on whether or not the license should be there?
Oh, well, I mean, I think I said this in the last meeting. I personally do not think that our long-term plan should be that the town holds a liquor license, but I accept the fact that we're in a situation where we have the estate, and it's one of the main ways we make money, and hopefully we're gonna have some proposals come forward from this visionary committee, so
And
I'm supportive
I
of a
agree with that.
one-year license.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think, we don't want to be standing in the way and.
Right.
and-
Pull the rug out from
Yeah, I
under
mean,
Right,
I want
so
it to
then-
make as much money as it can, so
There we go. So that
Maybe this
sounds like
committee
you
will-
support
yeah.
both
I
things.
support both things, yes.
So we need to make a motion to accept everything.
With the full amendment,
So I think, yes, what I'd be looking for is a motion to accept all, with the exception of, all as presented or whatever, except for Stephen Coolidge Place being a 1-month license, and
Waiving.
Rolf's being contingent upon outstanding materials being turned in, and Stephen's estate being waived the $3,000
That sounded perfect.
fee.
I would
make-
accept that as a motion, Madam
Will you
Chair.
make that motion?
I will, unless you want to do it.
No, you can make it, I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Thank you very
opposed?
much.
Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, we move out of licensing.
I'll second that one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, back to consent items. So the first one we have is to confirm the town manager appointment of Trudy Reed to the position of town clerk. So we all had an opportunity to speak with Ms. Reed, and now we are at a point where we need to make that appointment, so.
I would approve the town manager's appointment of Trudy Reed to the position of town clerk.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second, any discussion?
I think that I'm really excited about her joining
Yeah,
our staff.
nice
I think
fit.
that
Me
it was
too.
great to sit and
Very
speak with
good
her.
pick.
So good job,
Thank you.
committee,
Good
everyone that
job.
worked
And
together.
that we have a kind of an offline recruiter sitting over there in the corner who happened to meet her, and she said, hey, well, go ahead, apply. And just sort of a chance meeting, so that's great. Sometimes
Wow.
these things are made to happen.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we have an appointment of special counsel through June 30th, 2020 of KP Law.
I would make a motion to approve that appointment.
Second?
Any discussion?
Thank you. So this, we only see as the backup the actual time that we have these special counsels, the length of time that they have a contract with our municipality. But, like, what are the actual arrangements? Like, are we,
We keep them on retainer. We have a set hourly rate for both the Norris, Maria's labor. KP is like specialized items that if maybe we don't have the expertise for.
Like an
Um,
environmental attorney that's highly
Yeah.
specialized, that kind of thing.
If we had a dog hearing, something that we never do. It's good to keep them on retainer just in case we have a question or we need something.
so for those, especially if they're working on special projects, so let's say that there is an environmental issue, we contract with KP, we're working with KP on that issue. Are there restrictions to their availability, or do we build into that contract that they'd be available? I mean, like, I know, for instance, we contact you as our town manager sometimes outside of the traditional
Yeah.
9 to 5 or 9 to 4:30, 8 to 4:30 hours. And
We
so-
have relationships with many of the attorneys there. One lives in town.
Yep.
And so, anytime we need KP, we would basically just call them. I know since I've been here, Laurie's talked to Lauren Goldberg, I've talked to John Silverstein. It's a simple call, and they're usually very available. And so I've never had an issue getting them to come in if we need something. And so, yeah, we just basically we have them on retainer, we have an hourly rate set, and they know that we can call them if we run into any problems. So, and really, it's just a supplement what we have here currently, so.
That was actually one of the goals that we all agreed to. It was actually my goal that we, you know, as a town, we need the very best that we can get for legal work, and there's no person that's a master at all of them.
Yeah.
It's just impossible, especially things like environmental, or, you know, I could think of a few others, but I think it's important.
Okay, anything further? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next we need to vote appointment of Norris, Murray, and Peliquin as special counsel through June 30th, 2020.
And there are labor council.
2020.
Lieber.
Yeah, we've had them for a long time.
Move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Norris, Murray, Peliquin as special counsel through June 30th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Motion and second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. To vote, next on the agenda, vote and execute a release for Hillwood. So, Madam,
Okay, so
Town manager.
basically, Hildwood is, as we know, purchasing the property at 1600 Osgood, and one of the requirements of their agreement is that the parcels that they're purchasing be relieved from the development agreement, from the 40R in general. We don't yet have approval from the Attorney General for the repeal of the 40R, but we can affirmatively release Hildwood with no risk when it comes to the rest of the development agreement from the development agreement. Basically what we're saying is, we understand they've purchased the property, we understand that they do not plan to build residential there, and thus, because they're not building residential, and as long as they're not planning to build residential or under the 40R, they are not a party to or bound by the 40R development agreement. And they need this in order to close. And so that's why we're doing this kind of in advance of getting any final repeal from the Attorney General. And so this is not a amendment to the development agreement. It's not changing the obligations of the original parties to the development agreement. It's not changing anything about the original development agreement. It's merely stating that Hildwood is not a party to that and not bound by it, in the most simple way we can, basically.
So this is not relieving the owners of 1600 Osgood.
No,
from
they're
their
not a party to this agreement
obligations.
at all.
They're not party.
No,
Just to
they
be
are
clear.
not a party to this agreement. The only parties to this agreement, and that was purposely done, is Hildwood and the town.
Well, it all makes sense, and I can see that that could be a problem in the sale, if that's.
Right, and so they're moving towards closing, and they would like to have this in advance of that.
I think it all makes sense, and I would move approval.
And thank you to Suzanne, who worked really hard on getting us to here.
Do you need a vote for this?
Yeah, you might, yeah.
Oh, I have to read this,
Yeah.
okay. Because you have it out, I'll let you do it. Move that the Board of Selectmen approve and sign the release agreement between the town and Hillwood Enterprise LP regarding the use of a portion of 1600 Osgood Street pursuant to the Industrial 2 zoning district as presented.
Second?
Motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so, stick around, because we'll need to sign that, and that'll have to be notarized. We have that coming around soon.
Boy, that was a lot of paper to make that.
Okay. Next, we have a donation from Smart Start LLC in the amount of $100 to the fire department.
Move that the Board of Selectmen accept the donation of $100 from Smart Start to the Fire Department to be used for equipment.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we will follow that up with a thank you note to Smart Start LLC as also with that donation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next, we have to approve the Master Plan Implementation Committee membership and charge. So in your package, you should have the composition of the board, of the committee, and what their charge will be.
So if you remember correctly, the master plan called for an implementation committee to help with implementation. We think this will help streamline some of the processes and also create kind of advocates for the master plan, which I think is necessary, resident advocates. And so Jean, Andrew, and I worked together on this kind of mission statement, membership, and duties. Obviously, we can certainly make changes to the membership. What we were trying to really do is have you be the appointment power, but also have the planning board still have a really important role, because it's their master plan, and they should really be at the helping to do the implementation of it.
I like how you laid it out, and I think that we've already seen that staff have been identified as key places. I mean, the only thing I would tweak is if there are multiple selectmen that wanted to serve on it, I'd love to serve on it, having been part of that. At this point, it was several years ago, the process of selecting people to serve on that committee. I think that it's an exciting step to finally take, so that way, as Andrew used to say, we don't want to collecting dust on our shoulders.
No. We did a lot of work to get there.
Well, it was really delayed, actually. It was delayed because we had to wait until, I mean, we wanted to be at this point last fall.
Right.
And there were very serious things that kept us from being able to tackle that.
Keep hitting
So,
that, sorry. Whoever's watching at home is hearing that good loud bang every
Poor
time.
guy over here.
man with the hat
Sorry.
over his ear.
Mr. Chair, I move that the,
Sorry, I was gonna move that the Board of Selectmen accept the membership in charge of the Master Plan Implementation Committee as presented.
A motion, do I have a second?
second.
Second, all right, this is exciting. We're moving this along. We've got a lot of people asking about this committee, so it's really good that this is moving forward. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Perfect.
Great. We will get that posted and speak to the committees and post the at-large members.
Great. Next, we have a request of Rabbi Bornstein for permission to use the town common from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. short for the lighting of the menorah on December 19, 2019, and for the display of the menorah until December 31st, 2019.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the request of Rabbi Bronstein to use the town common for the lighting of the Hanukkah menorah and to display the menorah at the town common from December 19th until December 31st.
Motion, we
2019.
have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, unanimous. Next, we have a vote to ratify the contract between the town and the AFSCME Professional Librarian Union. Do I have a motion? Or,
We have to read that one, don't we?
yeah,
I'll move that the Board of Selectmen approve the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the AFSCME Local 2978 Professional Librarians for the period of July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2022.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. And then we have to vote to ratify the contract between the town and the AFSCME Clerical Union.
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the AFSCME Local 2978 Clerical Union for the period of July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2022.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous as well. Okay, so that does it for consent items. We've already gone through licensing. So we are on no old business, no new business. We have the town manager's report, the posting of the job log. Anything exciting there?
Nothing really exciting. We're doing interviews for the assistant accountant right now. We've got several postings in DPW. I believe we have 2 postings at 911. So if people know anyone, those are 911 in particular is very difficult to fill. We have an offer pending on the teen librarian.
Thank you. All right, selectmen updates and comments. Anybody have any updates or comments?
No, other than we did get a notice of grant for the fire department, which was very exciting, and so congratulations to fire department, and it was, of course, the chief, and I cannot recall the other gentleman's name, and I should
Jeff
Jeff.
Duchesne.
Thank you, Jeff Duchesne. Great job. I thought that was a good thing. I think we had a lot of fun at our breakfast. Sorry we missed you. You
Work calls sometimes.
work calls, and that's what people said, where are you? I said, oh, he's traveling a lot these days. And a lot of hard work by Lori and others. We got great donations again for the food, and actually, the Ganji family donated so much fruit that it went to the Stevens Estate for holidays, and it went to the police department, went to the fire department, and extra stayed at the senior center. They went all out. We were swimming in fruit. So, along with all the other Joe Fish, you know,
Market Basket.
Market
Heavenly
Basket,
Donuts.
Heavenly
Donuts.
Donuts.
We're gonna remember them all now, we're going down
Now
this
we
road.
do, and of course, yeah,
Well, Heavenly Donuts is great because they do it every morning.
they do it all the
that-
time.
That is their daily exercise, that they donate
Yeah.
anything extra the next day.
They
to
do.
Their senior center. So we displaced the seniors that morning, and so the food was for everyone, but it's great to have that generosity. So, and thank
Yeah.
you again.
And they're still good the next
For
day,
your
too.
generosity
And
with your
Did a great
time.
job.
And John,
Mhm.
and yourself behind the
Yeah.
grill, bringing
Yeah.
back the old days
Sure.
of the former Vals. So, that was all great. And I guess the other thing, of course, is wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. Travel safe, you know, and have a good time with your family and friends. I'm sorry, what? So,
Supposedly it's supposed to snow.
I think I'd like to give out a shout out to the festival committee, because this
Yes.
is really their busy time of year, and if you had an opportunity to go to the parade, the day after, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and then the tree lighting ceremony that Sunday, where it started to snow just as the lighting ceremony was starting, and then this past weekend, they had the Santa Claus breakfast. All of those were very well attended, very successful, so, these are all volunteers in our community that put on these great events for just a short period of one day each, and, just a real good shout out to Jeff Coco and his whole committee, that festival committee.
they work hard, so we all have fun.
Mhm.
It's great. It's really a good year with all that.
Any other comments?
See you next year.
See you
See you
next year,
next
and-
year.
Any parking ban inkling based on the weather?
Oh, yeah.
Not yet, so I think what we're seeing right now is this is gonna be a full day storm, looking at about 2 to 5 inches. It's supposed to start early in the morning with light snow, but then get heavy because it's gonna turn to freezing rain in the afternoon. I don't know if you know, but I'm partly a weatherman at this time of year. So I think we'll talk about it further, but based on what
Wind
what we're
gusts.
seeing, yeah, 2 to 5, I would doubt it. So,
Okay.
but we'll talk a little further tonight. Jim that was my phone buzzing, because that was Jim Stanford, the DPW director, saying we're all set for the morning, so,
Great.
we'll keep you posted.
Good. All right, our next scheduled meeting is January 13th, 2020.
Oh, good, we could go away.
So I will hear a motion, unless anybody has any parting comments?
Well, are we meeting at any point before?
Because I said scheduled, not currently scheduled, but, no, that's our next scheduled meeting, is January 13th.
It's almost 1 o'clock.
It was supposed to be the week before.
I was just gonna say, ooh, I don't have it on my calendar.
Right, it was supposed to be the 6th, but there
The
was a
conflict.
conflict.
And then we have the conference the next week.
Okay, so I'll hear a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn, the last meeting in 2019.
Second.
Second, discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.